Hi there, if you're new to the Textile Indie Basketry channel, my name is Brittany. We have woven the base of the basket, the walls of the basket, and now we're ready to start on the rim. We're going to be doing a technique called cut and tuck, putting on the rim and lashing. So lots to do. I want to dive right in. There's a full instruction manual and workshop on our website for purchase if you're interested in more depth on basket weaving and how to weave this basket specifically. The pattern is in there as well, so if you want the pattern for this basket to follow along, you can purchase that in the description below. When I finish a basket like this grid basket, I typically do a cut and tuck technique where I come in and I cut the stakes that are behind that top row flush with that row, so you can see all of these have been cut alternating around, and then those that are in front I fold over flush with that row, so they fold here, and then I come into the basket, go down a few rows, lift that away, and tuck these behind those rows to secure them in place. And this is actually what's going to hold the basket together, is this folded edge. So I fold that down, and now these are folded flush with that top row like so. And this is going to hold the basket securely together so it doesn't just fall apart on you. We are now to the rim of the basket. We're going to build the rim. So grab the 5/8 inch wide flat oval. If you're working out of our kit, you'll want to grab that bundle as well as your seagrass. If you're working from your materials, find a piece of nice 5/8 inch wide flat oval and a length of seagrass that goes around your basket. This can be a little unwieldy, so try to bundle it up and let it soak in the water for about 2 minutes. Because it's so thick, we like to soak it a little longer so that it stays nice and pliable. This rim is going to go over the top of this top row of weaving, so we're going to be covering up this top row. So grab your plastic clamps, the ones with the wide opening here. You want 4 or 5 of them for the rim. You're also going to need your box knife or your craft knife. Open that up and get that ready to go. Once your rim reed has soaked for a good long time, go ahead and wrap one end. If you have a single piece, we're going to wrap this around the top of the basket. Wrap it around and then bring it so that you have about a 2-inch overlap and cut it at that point for that 2-inch overlap. And then use that length. This is the one time we use a reed to measure another reed. Stretch this out and cut a second piece that same length. Now set your basket aside because we're going to do some trimming on each of these ends. So for both pieces, we're going to trim down one end. On the end here, I'm going to come in about 1.5 inches and trim away the rounded side until I get essentially a flat reed. We're working away some of the bulk so that we don't have as much bulk in the rim. So if you feel this, you want it to feel like the same thickness as a flat reed rather than having that rounded beveled edge. If you accidentally cut a little bit too much, just blunt that end and move back. That's why we do a bit of overlap. Be sure to close up your knife or set it aside so that you don't actually accidentally bump against it and cut yourself. Now with one of your rim pieces, the end you just trimmed down, and come to the middle of one of the sides. Stick this over top of the basket and clamp this in place. Sink the clamp nice and deep. Don't try to balance it on the edge like that. This is just going to pop off and hit someone in the head or fly away so you can't find it. And then feed this around the top of the rim and clamp it in place. 1 clamp per wall or side. You want this tight against the top here so that it doesn't bubble out and also doesn't pull too tight. So feed it around, clamp it in place. When you get to your starting point, you can come in and we're going to cut this right here. So where I left off trimming right here, that's where I want this to meet. So there's just a little bit of that end where that starts to curve in and cut away. Just a little bit of that shows. What this does, what that trimming did here, is it lowered the amount of bulk that's going to happen in this spot. And so it's not quite as bulky. Now, something that I like to do on my baskets is come in and trim away these corners so that they're not as sharp, and then round this out This means that this end looks a little bit neater. It's not quite as harsh or blunt of an end. Once you have that in place, you can come move the clamp over top so it holds the two layers in place, and that is your outer rim. Now we'll do the same thing for the inner rim. Get the piece with the end that you trim down, but this time we're going to curve this the opposite way it wants to go so that the rounded side is to the inside of the basket. So my outside joint is over on this side. This is where they overlapped. I'm going to put this one on the opposite wall. So I'm going to use the same clamps, reposition them, and this time I'm feeding this into the inner rim or the inside of the basket, trying to make sure that I get enough reed that it presses against the wall, stays nice and tight up against that wall without creating too much or too many spaces. And then again, trim it at that point where you started whittling the reed down or the thickness down, and then trim these corners off. Clamp this in place like so, and now you have an inner rim and an outer rim. I'll point out right here, there's a little bit of buckling in the reed. That's okay here because we're going to be lashing around this reed and that will hold it in place. Sometimes the reed does that and it's just a natural aspect of working with a natural material. Here's another spot where that's happening. That will get sandwiched in as well. Now we're going to take a piece of seagrass and tuck this under a clamp like so, and then feed it around into the channel, moving the clamps and sticking that in there. So we're putting this in between the two pieces of the flat oval reed, our rim pieces. This will cover up any of that cut and tuck. Now cut this an inch beyond the end so that these ends overlap about an inch. Tuck those in. And now your rim is set up and we're ready to do the lashing. Now we've come to the lashing part of the basket. Grab a piece of 1/4 inch wide flat oval reed, wrap it around the top of the basket so that it loops around 3 times. Once you have those 3 wraps, you can cut that length. There's a lot of pulling through the spaces that we have to do, so it's good to have just the right amount of length with some excess and not too much, because that is just a waste of energy trying to pull all that length through. Now put this in your water bin, and this one we're going to let sit for about 30 seconds as well to ensure that it's nice and pliable, because we're going to be doing a lot of pulling and tugging on this piece. To start the lashing, we're going to create a loop around the inner rim. So take the 1/4 inch wide flat oval reed with the rounded side facing up, and you're going to come in, pull the inner rim away from the basket and place this into that space. So like so, and then create a little loop up. So you fold that against the inner rim, take this tail and send it back into the same space between the inner rim and the basket. Pull on both ends so that it pulls nice and tight around that rim piece. And now rotate your basket to the outside so that you're looking at the outside of your basket. And this is where we're going to start doing the lashing stitch or whip stitch. Ideally, you start away from your joint, so on one of the opposite sides from where your joint is, and then lift this to the side so you're looking at the side of the basket. Grab your packing tool and move the rim away so you can see what's underneath. We're going to be sending a stitch under that top row of weaving between the first and the second row. So if you send your packing tool in that space between the stakes, that's where we're sending our stitch. So we'll come down here, grab this flat oval reed and have it facing out to the outside. We're going to stitch from the outside to the inside. And I want you to glide this through your thumb and fingers the full length, because we don't want this to get twisted when we send it through the space, or we're going to end up with a corkscrew and it'll break and cause problems. So keep that oriented, and then rounded side facing down, tuck that into that space, send it through around all the layers, and then pull tight. This is going to want to catch everything around you, so just watch your loop as you pull pull, and then get that seagrass into the space and pull tight. Now we'll loop it from the inside to the outside, come to the outside, find the next space between stakes. We're going to do a stitch every space. Glide this through your thumb so that the rounded side is against your thumb, through your hands. Send this into that space, pull through. Grip the rim with your left hand and pull nice and tight with your right hand so that you're sandwiching or squashing the seagrass in between the layers, and then pull through. I like to prep by pulling first and then going in with my packing tool to find that space. Send the reed into that space and then pull it tight. If the seagrass starts to sink, you can come in and lift that up so it sits right at the top. Pull secure. You want to pull nice and snug. This is going to shrink as it dries, just like the packing we did. We want to pull this tight because any looseness is going to cause breakage issues in the future if it's tight, because the rim gets lots of wear and we want that nice and secure so it doesn't just crack and break. So I'm pulling snug, looping around, pulling the length through so I keep it oriented, create a space. The thing about this lashing is that it can be easy to go too many rows down and catch too many rows inside the rim, and then you have a skip step where it goes down too far. So just make sure you're catching that one row underneath or in the sandwich and not going below that. As you're lashing, you're basically doing a whip stitch around the basket to hold everything in place. The tighter you pull, the stronger your rim will be, to a point. You don't want to pull so tightly that the lashing reed breaks, and that does happen. So kind of balance out pulling snug and pulling too hard on the lasher. If you pull straight out like this, where the reed is parallel to the bottom, then you're less likely to break your reed. If you pull straight up, you're pulling it against the bottom of the rim and you're causing strain, and so that will be a breaking point if it's not strong enough. So try to pull straight out, not up. Continue lashing until you get all the way around the basket. Once you get back to where you started, I'll show you how to finish off your lashing reed. As you round the corner and come towards the end, if you end up with a bubble like this guy, where your rim is sticking out further than your basket, what you'll do is, typically, if you continue to stitch and you pull tight on your weaver, as long as your end piece is loose and it can still move fairly easily, it's not smashed down or right up against the edge of your cut end, this should have a little bit of movement there. I can pull tight and this bubble should push itself out. And here there's that little bubble where this piece has bubbled up. I'm going to be able to loop over that and cover that up a bit here. I've got one more space here. Pull tight, try to push some of this excess into the basket by wiggling it around a little bit. And that kind of works out some of that bubble. And then I'll lift up my seagrass, pull tight on this stitch. And then because this gap happens, what I like to do is do one more stitch in the same starting hole right here. So I send this in and through and pull tight. You can go right over or just to the side of that. And I pull tight so that that starting section is nice and snug. Cut yourself a 5-inch tail, and then with the packer, create a space into the inner rim so that it sinks down into the basket like that. And then follow the tool with this end. Lift the tool out of your way so you can pull that end around the inner rim, pull it down snug, secure. And then these ends, I'm going to cut an inch tail like this, and those will dry and stay put right where they're at. So you can come in and tuck them if you want, but I like to let them just sit there because once they're dry, they're not going to move and they stay nice and secure inside the basket. So that is lashing the rim. And we have a completed cross-stitch napkin basket. This is a really fun project and it offers a lot of customization and versatility. You could weave this with dyed reeds or plain reeds, change the size. There's lots of variety you can do with this. If you weave a cross-stitch basket, we'd love to see your finished project. You can tag us on social media at Textile Indie. You can join our email list and we'll send you updates of things here on the channel, as well as coupon codes and things from our shop and what's happening on the Textile Indie website. Thanks so much for joining me in this series, and until next time, check out this video for more fun basketry content. Happy weaving. See you later.